Bruchim haboim. Welcome everyone. We're about to begin Be'ezras Hashem together on Daf Mem Vov Amud Aleph, starting with Daf Mem Hey Amud Beis, 4 lines from the bottom. Our Mishnah states that in regards to dough that is in the cracks of a kneading bowl, if it's a shear of a kazayis, you have to mevayer. If it's less than a kazayis, it's bottle. The Mishnah goes on to say v'chein le'inyan tuma. Says our Gemara, Mi dami. The Gemara asks right away, what is the comparison from the Reisha to the Seifa? The Seifa states, V'chein le'inyan tuma, im makbid alav choytzetz, v'im roite b'kiyume harehu ke'areva. Ask the Gemara, what kind of comparison is that to the Reisha? Harei hasim b'shi'ur talyim milsa, hacha b'kepeda talyim milsa. Our Reisha is speaking about a shear of a kazayis or less than a kazayis. The Seifa of the Mishnah, that's talking about whether a person is makbid or not. So what kind of then similarity is it there to say v'chein le'inyan tuma? Omar Rav Yehuda comes to explain Eima u'le'inyan hatuma eino kain. You have to say that the Mishnah states that it's not the same thing in regards to tuma. Unlike when it comes to Pesach, which is a shear of a kazayis or less than a kazayis. In regards to tuma, it's totally dependent on the owner. Is he makbid or is he not makbid? Omar le Abaye objects to Rav Yehuda's explanation of the Mishnah. He says, "V'hachein le'inyan tuma ketani." Our Mishnah states the words "v'chein le'inyan tuma." Is mashma that there is, yes, a comparison between the Reisha and the Seifa. Explains Abaye. Elo Omar Abaye hachi ka'omar. This is how you have to explain the Mishnah. V'chein le'inyan siruf tuma ba Pesach. On top of Mem Vov Amud Aleph. In regard to the very factor that we use to determine whether there's a shear of a kazayis in the cracks of a kneading bowl, that will be the factor that will then also determine whether it will also mitztarif to food to make it into a shear of a kibetza to metame other foods. So it's the same thing. However, in regards to the other days of the year, not on Pesach, then there's a distinction. Now the Gemara explains what we just said, according to Abaye's explanation of the Mishnah. Heichi dami, what is the case that we're talking about over here in our Mishnah? Kigon, di'ika bepachos mikabetza, oichlin, v'nogu b'hai botzek. You have some food that's less than a kibetza, and it comes in contact with this dough that is in the sedek of the kneading bowl. And here we're talking about where it became tamei. So now, does it mitztaref to the dough that is in the bowl to make a kibetza, whereby other food that will come in contact with it will also become tamei? Because again, the principle is that for a food that is tamei to metame other food, it has to be a shear of a kibetza. So over here, we're saying again, kigon di'ika pochos mikabetza, oichlin v'nogu b'hai botzek. It's less than a kibetza, the food itself, but it now touches the botzek in the bowl. By Pesach, the Yisur chashuv mitzaref. By Pesach, where it has the Yisur itself, here we're talking about where, let's say, there's a kazayis that is on the side, not on the bottom of the bowl, and therefore it's not asuin lechazik. So there, according to that shear of a kazayis, on Pesach, it's a shear of chashuv to be osir. You'd have to mevar it. So therefore, it's mitztarif in order to then make a combination of a kibetza to then metama other food. But the rest of the year, the kepeda talia milsa is totally on the owner's kepeda. Im makbid alov mitztarif. If the owner is makbid on this dough, then we say that it's yes mitztarif. If he wants it to be part of the bowl, however, harehu ke'areva, then it's part of the bowl and doesn't mitztaref to the oichel to then combine to make a shear of a kibetza that will metama other food. Maski flo Rava. Rava now asks on Abaye's explanation. Mi ketani mitztaref. Does it say the word mitztaref? The way you're explaining it, it should say mitztaref, to combine in order to then make a full kabetza, to me something that can metame. V'hachaytzeitz kitani. But our Mishnah, the lashon of the Mishnah says the word chaytzeitz. I'll read you the lashon of the Mishnah. V'chein linyan tuma imakbid alov v'chaytzeitz. So he used the word chaytzeitz. Doesn't word the word mitzdaref. According to you, Abaye, the proper language in the Mishnah should be saying mitzdaref. Elo mar Rava, therefore Rava comes and says v'chein laha'alois tahara la'areva. It's talking about to make this bowl something that will then be immersed in a mikvah and become tahor. That's what we're talking about over here. As follows. Hey chidami, what's the case? Kigoin. The itami hach areva uboy la'adbule. The areva, the bowl, is tameh. You want to then be matbil this bowl into a mikvah to metahir it. So it depends. If it's bepesach, the isurei chashuv, as chaytzitz v'loy salka latvila. If it's during Pesach and you have this kazayis on the side of the bowl in the cracks, and therefore kazayis is considered to be chashuv, to be something you have to mevar on Pesach. It has chashivus, whereby it's independent from the bowl, whereby it'll be a chatzitza. It'll be a chatzitza when you're matbil the bowl, whereby it's not going to be a valid tvila. The rest of the year that's not during Pesach, it depends. It depends on the kepeda of the owner of the bowl. If the owner is makbid on this dough, then that which he's makbided is going to be chaytzitz. It's going to be independent from the bowl, whereby it will not be a good tevila. If he's not makbid, that means he wants it to be part of the bowl. Therefore, the tevila of the bowl is valid. Maski lo Rav Papa. Now Rav Papa asks on Rava's pshat. Mi kitani v'chein le'inyan tahara. Does it say le'chein le'inyan tahara? No. It says v'chein le'inyan tuma. According to Rava's pshat, it should say v'chein le'inyan tahara, because we're talking about a situation where you're metaher the bowl. Ha le'inyan tuma kitani. It says v'chein le'inyan tuma. Answers Rav Papa then explains in a slightly different way. Elo Amar Papa. Rather it says v'chein le'inyan harid tuma la'areva. It's talking about where tuma goes onto the bowl. That's what we're talking about here in the Mishnah. And he explains as follows. Hey chidami, what is the case? Kegoin. The naga sheretz behai botik. A dead sheretz, one of the shmona shrotzim, that is metar as an av hatuma, and it's metame then the bowl. So now, depends. If it metame, it touches the bet botzek, it touches the dough that is in the crack of this side of the bowl, which is a shear of a kazayis. So it depends when it happened. If it's ba Pesach, then be isurei choshiv chaytzeit v'lo nachta latuma. If it's on Pesach, since a kazayis has chashivus, it's a mavair the botzek. Therefore, it's considered to be independent of the bowl, whereby the sheretz was metame the dough, but was not metame the bowl, because it's independent from the bowl. And therefore, lo nachta la tuma. The tuma did not then go into the bowl. However, b'shar yemois hashana, the rest of the year, that's not during Pesach, the bekepeda talia, then it depends on the owner's kepeda. If the balabayis of this bowl is makbid, that means he wants this dough, then when the sheretz comes in contact with the dough, then it's independent of the trough of the bowl, whereby it's not metame the rest of the bowl, the areva. It's only metame the actual dough that it touched. However, if he wants the kiyum of the dough, he wants it to remain in the bowl, becomes tafel to the bowl, becomes part of the bowl, whereby that which the sheretz even only touched the dough, he's metame the entire bowl. The Gemara now brings the next Mishnah. What happens if you have a piece of dough and it's not clear the status of this dough? Is it something that has chametz or not? Botzek hacherish. Botzek hacherish means that a person pounds the dough. Normally, the reaction of the dough would be making a sound if it was chametz. A person hits the dough and he doesn't hear any sound. Like a cherish, when one makes contact, he wants to say something to the cherish, and the cherish does not react because he doesn't hear him. Another explanation that some of the Rishonim bring on this Mishnah is b'tzeik hacheres. It's a hard dough, whereby it doesn't have any indication of whether it's chametz or not. So the Mishnah says, "Im yesh kayotze boy." If you have other doughs that were needed at the same time as this dough, then shechmitz hareza also. Then those doughs that have showed sign of chametz, then you can then extrapolate and say this dough also is equally has chametz. Ask the Gemara right away, im ein sham kayotze boy mao. But what happens if you don't have any other doughs that were needed together with this dough, whereby there's no indication as to what the status of this dough would be? What is the din? Omar Rabbi Abahu, Omar Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish. Rabbi Abahu says the name Rabbi Shimon Lakish. Kedei sheyelech odam memigdal nunya leTaveria meal. If it's going to be then the distance when one travels from Migdal Nunya to Tiveria, dahainu, it's a meal, then you can assume that his already chametz. I asked the Gemara, v'nema meal, say meal. By the way, meal, according to most of the Rishonim, is 18 minutes. So if it was then a distance of that he traveled, which would have been a time span of 18 minutes, then it's chametz. Why ask the Gemara did not say straight a meal? Why do you say between the distance of Migdal Nunya and Tiveria? Hakamashman the shi'uroi the meal can make Migdal Nunya of Tiveria to teach you that the shear of a meal is when an average person walks between the area of Migdal Nunya to Tiveria. Omar Rabbi Abo, Omar Rabbi Shimon Lakish. Another statement that Rabbi Abohu said in name Rabbi Shimon Lakish. Legabal Litfilo uletilas yodayim arba milin. There are three things he lists over here that also require a time span, but this time it's a time span is 4 milin, which would be 4 times 18 minutes, 72 minutes. The first one is legabel. Here it's talking about a person was hired to knead dough for somebody else in that person's bowl, in his kneading bowl. If it was discovered that the kneading bowl is tameh, so he's only required to then walk a distance of 4 mil. That means 72 minutes to then be able to then get this bowl and matpil it so he can retire the bowl. If it's beyond that, he's not required to do so. The second item, tefillah. A person is traveling, and as he's traveling, to get to the minyan, he'd have to go forward in the direction that he's traveling in 4 mil. In order to make the minyan, he's required to do so. Ulentilas yodayim. Similarly, he's traveling and needs to wash for bread, a bread meal. Then, if he's traveling in the direction that he's traveling in, would be water then to wash his hands within 4 mil. He's required to do that. Beyond that, not. He can go ahead and cover his hands and eat the bread with gloves or other such things that are covering his hands. Says the Gemara, Omar of Nachman bar Yitzchok, Aivu Amru. He pointed out it wasn't Rabbi Abohu who said the name Rabbi Shimon, these 3 items. It was Rabbi Aivu who said it, the name Rabbi Lakish. Va'arbo Amar Bo. And it was 4 items, not 3. V'chad minayu ibud. And one of the items that was not listed here, the 4th one is ibud in regards to then tanning. This not, it states in the following Mishnah. V'kulan she'ibdon. All of these skins that are soft and edible, if they were ibdon, if they then started the tanning process, or shehilech bohen, either they shilech ban, or they walked, they treaded on them, kedei avoida tahirin, and did so kedei avoida. When they treaded on them, it was kedei avoida. Then they are tahirin. That means to say they don't mekabel tuma as food anymore, even though they were edible until that point. Chutz me'or ha'adam, with the exception of the skins of a person. Bekam kedei avoida. What's considered kedei avoida? Let's say a person's starting the process by treading on these skins. So how long does it have to be kedei avoida for him to be considered now that it takes it out of the status of oichel, and now it's tohor? Cannot be mekabel tuma. Amr Rabbi Yonai. Here it really should state Rabbi Ivoi, according to what we said before. Rabbi Ivoi said this statement. Kedei hiluch arba milin. When it comes to then, when one is treading and starting the process of then the tanning process, that treading on these skins has to be an amount of 72 minutes in order for it to be considered to be now no more longer an oichel. Omar Rabbi Yosi Rabbi Chanina lo shonu ela lefonov. That which we said when one is traveling to then go on his journey and he needs to then daven, he's to travel the forward 4 meal in order to find a minyan. Beyond that, he doesn't have to then find the minyan. He can daven b'yechidus. But he now states over here, Rabbi Yosi Rabbi Chanina, lo yishonu ela lefonov, aval la'acharov, afilu mil eino choizer. But behind him, he doesn't have to even go a meal in the opposite direction. Behind is the traveling in the direction that he's traveling in. That's in regards to tefillah. It's also in regards to netilas yadayim. By tefillah, he will then be menake his hands with a immediate menake, and he will then clean his hands that way, and then daven. And like we said before, in regards to then a bread meal, he'll cover his hands, let's say with some sort of bag or some sort of gloves, and then he'll eat his meal. The Psachim, by the way, say if a person's sitting in his house, he's not traveling, so then also has the din of up to 1 meal to find a minyan. And also would be huadin when it comes to then finding water for netilas yadayim. So it would be a traveling up to 18 minutes. Omer Rav Acha, and Rav Acha now qualifies mina milhu de'enoi choizer. That which we can learn now that he said up to a meal, he doesn't be choizer. That means more than a meal. Ha pachos me meal choizer. But if it's within a meal, then he would have to be choizer and go after the water both for tefillah and netilas yodayim.